Ethan Rook lived alone on the 12th floor of a building that had long since given up pretending to be anything more than what it was. A tired, gray slab of concrete wedged between others just like it. The paint peeled in thin curls along the hallways, elevators groaned like reluctant beasts, and the windows framed a skyline of rooftops, antennas, and distant haze instead of anything resembling beauty. From his balcony, Ethan could see the city stretching endlessly in every direction, but none of it felt alive. It was all just there, static, predictable, like everything else in his life. That was the way he liked it. Routine meant control, and control meant quiet. Every weekday began the same way. His alarm buzzed at 6:30, sharp and unforgiving. He would silence it immediately, never snoozing, never lingering, then sit at the edge of his bed for exactly 10 seconds before standing. Bathroom, shower, cheap instant coffee, toast, sometimes eggs if he had the energy. By 7:15, he was out the door. By 8, he was at work. By 5, he was gone. By 6, he was home again. Dinner was whatever required the least effort. Microwave meals, instant noodles, leftovers if there were any. He would eat in front of the television, though he rarely paid attention to what was playing. Noise filled the silence, and that was enough. By 10, he was in bed. Repeat. There was comfort in the sameness. No surprises meant no disappointments. No expectations meant no failures. Ethan had built his life carefully, trimming away anything unnecessary until only the essentials remained. Work, food, sleep. Nothing more. Nothing complicated. Nothing that could go wrong. And for a long time it worked. Until the cat appeared. It happened on a Tuesday evening, though later, Ethan would find it difficult to remember exactly which Tuesday it had been. At the time, it felt like any other day. He had come home later than usual, irritation lingering from a minor issue at work that had somehow dragged on longer than it should have. His shoulders were tight, his mind restless. All he wanted was to eat something warm and forget the day had ever happened. He dropped his keys into the small bowl by the door, slipped off his shoes, and moved through the apartment without turning on the lights. The dim glow from the city outside was enough to guide him. It always was. The air inside was stale. He frowned slightly, crossing the living room to the glass door that led to the balcony. It stuck, as it always did, and he had to put a bit of weight into sliding it open. Cool evening air rushed in, carrying with it the distant hum of traffic and the faint scent of dust and rain. Ethan stepped out and stopped. There was something on his balcony. At first, he thought it was a shadow, a trick of the fading light, but as his eyes adjusted, the shape sharpened, gaining definition. Small, still, watching, a cat. It sat near the railing, its body perfectly aligned, its tail wrapped neatly around its paws. Its fur was black, so black it seemed to swallow what little light there was, and it stood out sharply against the pale concrete beneath it. Its eyes were what caught him. Golden. Not the dull yellow of most strays, but something deeper, richer. They reflected the city lights in a way that made them seem almost luminous, like tiny, burning embers set into its face. And they were fixed entirely on him. Ethan froze, his hand still resting on the edge of the sliding door. Huh, he murmured. The cat didn't move. Most strays would have bolted at the sight of a human, especially this high up where escape routes were limited. But this one simply sat there, calm and unmoving, as though it had been expecting him. Ethan felt a small flicker of unease. How did you even get up here? 12 floors wasn't something a normal animal just wandered onto. There were no nearby trees, no connecting ledges. The balconies were spaced too far apart. It didn't make sense. The cat blinked slowly. Ethan exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. Yeah, all right, don't answer. He took a cautious step forward. The cat didn't react. Another step. Still nothing. Ethan stopped a few feet away, studying it. It looked healthy, too healthy. Its coat was clean, almost glossy, and there were no visible injuries, no signs of malnutrition, not what he would expect from a stray. Someone lose you? He asked, more to himself than anything. The cat tilted its head slightly. The motion was small but deliberate, almost thoughtful. Ethan frowned. You're a weird one, he muttered. The cat held his gaze. There was something unsettling about the way it watched him, not fearful, not cautious, but attentive, focused, as though he were the interesting one. He shifted his weight, suddenly aware of how exposed he felt under that unblinking stare. All right, he said after a moment, stay there. He turned and went back inside, half expecting the cat to vanish the second he took his eyes off it. But when he returned a minute later, a small piece of leftover chicken in hand, it was still there. Waiting. Ethan crouched slowly, keeping his movements deliberate. He extended his hand, placing the chicken on the ground a safe distance away. There, he said, "Food, that's all I've got." He leaned back, giving it space. The cat didn't move immediately. For a long moment, it simply watched him. Then, with a fluid, almost graceful motion, it stood. Each step it took was silent, precise. It approached the food, lowered its head, and sniffed it once. Then it ate. No hesitation. No suspicion. Just acceptance. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Well," he said softly, "guess that settles that." He stayed there for a few minutes, watching as the cat finished the chicken and sat back down, licking its paws with meticulous care. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. And for the first time that day, maybe for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt something different settle into the quiet. Not discomfort. Not restlessness. Just a presence. The next evening, the cat was there again. Sitting in the same spot. Waiting. Ethan noticed it immediately when he stepped onto the balcony, a faint sense of recognition sparking in his chest. "Well," he said, raising an eyebrow, "you came back." The cat blinked. That was all. But somehow it felt like an answer. Ethan shook his head, a small, almost reluctant smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "All right, give me a second." This time he didn't hesitate. He went straight to the fridge, pulled out some leftovers, and returned with a small portion set aside. The routine repeated. Food placed down. Cat approaches. Eats. Leaves. Or rather, not quite. Because this time the cat lingered. After finishing, it didn't immediately slip away into the night. Instead, it settled back into its usual spot, curling its tail neatly around itself as it watched him. Ethan leaned against the railing, arms crossed. "You don't make a sound, you know that," he said. "No meowing, no anything." The cat blinked. He snorted softly, "Yeah, real talkative." Silence stretched between them. But it didn't feel awkward. And that, more than anything, was new. Days turned into weeks. The cat kept coming. Every evening like clockwork. No matter the weathers. No matter the hours. It was always there. Waiting. And Ethan, without ever consciously deciding to, began to plan for it. He started setting aside portions of his meals. Not much at first, just scraps. Then, eventually, he bought actual cat food, leaving a small container by the kitchen counter. He added a bowl of water to the balcony. He even cleared a small space near the railing, moving aside old clutter to give the animal somewhere more comfortable to sit. He didn't question why. It just made sense. Somewhere along the way, the presence of the cat stopped being unusual. It became part of the routines. Work, food, sleep. And the cats. "You're consistent, I'll give you that," Ethan said one evening, crouching as he set down the food. The cat watched him. "You got a name," he added, "or am I just supposed to keep calling you Cat?" No responses. Ethan huffed figures. He sat down, leaning his back against the wall, stretching his legs out in front of him. The city lights flickered in the distance, a sea of artificial stars. The cat finished eating and, as usual, returned to its spot. Watching. "You know," Ethan said after a moment, "you're probably someone's pet." The cat tilted its head. "Yeah, clean coat, no fear of people, either that or you're just weird." It blinked slowly. Ethan let out a quiet laugh. "All right, you're definitely weird." What Ethan didn't notice was how the night seemed quieter now. The usual sounds of distant animals, birds, stray dogs, even insects, grew faint around his building. What he didn't notice was how the shadows on his balcony sometimes shifted in ways that didn't quite match the light. Or how on certain nights the cat's golden eyes seemed to glow, not just reflect, but emit a faint, steady radiance. He didn't notice the way the air itself seemed to hold its breath when the cat arrived. And he definitely didn't notice the figure high above the city. Watching, waiting, patient. Because to Ethan it was simple. It was just a cat. A strange one, sure. A quiet one, but harmless. And every evening when he stepped onto the balcony and saw it there, something in his chest eased, just a little. The routine had changed, but not in a way that felt dangerous. Not in a way that threatened the careful, controlled life he had built. No, this was different. This was good. And so he fed the cat. Every day, never knowing, he was feeding something far more than it appeared. Far above the city, beyond the reach of towers, beyond the drifting haze of pollution and the dim glow of human lights, something vast moved in silence. It existed where air thinned and sound died, where the sky darkened into a deep, endless blue that bordered on the void. To human eyes there was nothing there. No shape, no shadow, only empty sky. But it was not empty. She was there. The Dragon Queen. She did not perch upon clouds, for clouds could not bear her weight. She did not ride the winds, for the winds bent themselves around her. She simply was, a presence so immense that the world below could not comprehend it. Her wings stretched wide, vast membranes of living night threaded with veins of molten gold. Each slow beat of those wings stirred currents that never reached the ground, shifting the upper skis like tides. Her scales shimmered, reflecting no single color but all of them at once. Midnight black, deep crimson, flickers of ancient fire trapped beneath a surface older than memory. Her eyes burned, not with simple light but with awareness that spanned centuries. She had seen empires rise like sparks and fade to ash. She had watched mountains crumble, seas shift, and stars move across the heavens in patterns long forgotten by mortal minds. She was not merely a creature. She was a force, a constant, a queen, and yet, she waited. Below her, the city stretched like a grid of dim embers, flickering with fragile life. Human lights blinked in patterns that mimicked constellations, though they lacked the permanence of true stars. To her, it was small, insignificant, a scattering of temporary structures built by beings who measured their lives in decades instead of centuries. She had seen cities like this before. Hundreds, thousands. They rose, they thrived, they collapsed. Always the same. Humans built with urgency, as though trying to outrun the inevitability of time itself. They never succeeded. And she had never cared. Until now. Her gaze narrowed, focusing not on the city as a whole, but on a single point within it. A building, unremarkables, gray, worn forgettables. The kind of place no king would notice, no hero would visit, no story would remember. And yet it was there. That was where her attention lay. That was where it was. The hatchling, her hatchling, the only ones. The memory of its birth flickered through her mind, vivid despite the passing of years. A cavern deep beneath the roots of the world, where heat pulsed through stone and ancient magic coiled like a living thing. There, among rivers of molten rock and pillars of crystal older than civilization, the egg had rested. She had guarded it, not as a ruler, not as a conqueror, but as a mother. For centuries, she had waited for it to stir. Dragons did not hatch quickly. They were not creatures of haste. Each heartbeat of their kind was deliberate, measured, tied to forces far beyond the concerns of lesser beings. But when the egg finally cracked, the world had changed. She remembered the first breath it took, the way the air itself seemed to ignite around it. The small, fragile form that had emerged, no larger than a wolf, its scales soft, its wings unsteady. It had looked at her. And in that moment, the queen, who had shattered kingdoms and silenced gods, had felt something she had not known in millennia. Fear, not for herself, but for it. Dragons were not meant to be few. Once they had filled the skies. Once their kind had been as endless as the stars. But time had not been kind. Wars had been fought against humans, against other ancient beings, against each other. Slowly, inevitably, their numbers had dwindled. Until there was almost nothing left. And this hatchling, it was hope. It was continuation. It was everything. So when it vanished, the world trembled. She had felt it immediately. The bond between them was not something distance could sever. It stretched across realms, across dimensions, across the very fabric of reality. And one day, it shifted, not broken, not extinguished, but distant, faint, moving, The queen had risen from her domain with a fury that split the earth. Mountains cracked beneath her ascent, oceans recoiled, storms gathered in her wake drawn to the sheer force of her will. She followed the bond. Across continents, across oceans, across the boundary between worlds, until she found it. The human realm. She had not entered it in centuries. There had been no reason to. Humans were transient. Their conflicts, their ambitions, their entire existence unfolded and ended in the span of a single dragon's contemplation. But her hatchling was here. And that changed everything. She had prepared for destruction. It would have been simple. Descend, burn, tear, reduce the city and everything within it to nothing. Search the ashes. Find her child. Leave. That was what she had intended. Until she saw him. The humans. At first he was nothing. A single figure on a balcony. Small, insignificant, fragile. One among millions. He stood there, unaware of the presence above him, unaware of the ancient gaze that had fixed upon him, unaware of how close he was to death. And then, the hatchling appeared. It moved in a form so diminished that it bordered on mockery, a small black creature, its wings hidden, its power veiled. Look at. The queen's rage ignited. Her wings spread, eclipsing the sky as she prepared to descend. To reclaim. To punish. To destroy. And then, she hesitated. The human had seen it. He had approached. The queen watched, her fury held in check by a thread of curiosity. What would he do? Humans feared what they did not understand. They destroyed what they could not control. They captured, caged, exploited. That was their nature. But this one did none of those things. He crouched, slowly, carefully, not like a predator, not like a master, but like an equal. He offered food. The queen stilled. The hatchling accepted. No fear, no coercions, no dominance, just exchange. The queen did not understand. She watched as the human spoke. His voice was soft, uncertain, filled with sounds that meant nothing to her ears, but his tone. It was not command, not threat, not worship. It was a simple. The hatchling ate and remained. The queen did not descend. She watched, night after night. At first she expected it to change. Humans were inconsistent, unreliable. They shifted with mood, with desire, with circumstance. Kindness was fleeting. Self-interest was eternal. But the humans remained the same. He returned each evening. He offered food. He spoke. He made space. He expected nothing. The queen observed everything. She saw the way he moved, careful, deliberate, as though afraid to startle the hatchling. She saw the way he sat nearby, not imposing, not demanding attention. She saw the way he spoke into the silence, filling it not with control but with presence. And she saw the hatchling's response. It returned. Again, and again, and again. Not out of need. The queen knew her child could hunt, could survive, could thrive in this world if it chose to reveal its true nature. It did not need the humans, but it chose him. That was what unsettled her. Dragons did not choose lightly. Even in youth, their instincts were ancient, their awareness deep. They were not drawn to weakness. They did not seek companionship among lesser beings. And yet, her hatchling returned to the balcony. Every night, the queen circled above unseen, her presence masked by magic older than the sky itself. She watched the city. She watched the building. She watched the humans. And slowly, her anger cooled. Not extinguished. Never that, but tempered. Replaced by something unfamiliar. Curiosity. What was this human? He had no powers. No magic. No significance. And yet, he had her child's attention. That alone made him noteworthy. She studied him as she would an enemy, as she would a rival, as she would a force she did not yet understand. Days passed, weeks, patterns emerged. The human lived a small life. Predictable, repetitive, contained. He left in the mornings, returned in the evenings, fed the hatchling, spoke, said, watched the sky. He did not seek more, did not strive, did not conquer. He simply existed. The queen did not understand that either. Humans in her experience were driven by hunger. For power, for wealth, for recognition. They built empires, waged wars, destroyed each other in pursuit of fleeting dominance. But this one sought none of it. He had carved out a space in the world and chosen to remain within it. Why? The queen did not know. But she continued to watch. Because of the hatchling. Always because of the hatchling. Time to her was meaningless. She could have waited years, decades, but the hatchling could not remain. Not forever. It needed to grow, to learn, to claim its place in a world that would not understand it. And when that time came, she would take it back. The thought should have been simple, unquestioned, absolute, but it was not. Because now, there was the human. She had seen the way the hatchling looked at him. Not as prey, not as lesser, but as something else. And she had seen the way the human looked back. Without fear, without reverence, without expectation. It was not a bond she recognized, but it was a bond. And bonds had power. The queen shifted in the sky, her wings stirring silent storms. Her gaze remained fixed on the small balcony far below. The human stepped outside. The hatchling was already there. Waiting, the queen watched as the familiar ritual unfolded. Food, a stillness, presence, simple, meaningless, insignificant. And yet, she could not look away. Because something was changing. Not in the world, not in the hatchling, but in her. A question had taken root. Small, persistent, unwelcome, and it refused to fade. When the time came, when she descended, when she claimed what was hers, what would the human do? Would he run? Would he fight? Would he beg? Or would he stand? As he had every night before. Calm, steady, unafraid. The queen did not know. And that, more than anything, was why she waited. The night the sky broke, Ethan Rook thought briefly, irrationally, that he had simply forgotten something important. A bill unpaid. A deadline missed. A message unanswered. The kind of small mistake that lingered at the back of the mind, nagging, persistent, refusing to be ignored. Because that was how his world worked. Small problems, manageable problems. Things that could be fixed. Things that made sense. This did not make sense. The sound came first. Not thunder, not exactly, but something deeper. A low, rolling vibration that seemed to pass not just through the air but through the bones of the city itself. Windows rattled, metal groaned. The very structure of the building hummed as if resonating with a frequency too vast to comprehend. Ethan paused halfway through setting down his dinner. The fork slipped from his hand, clattering softly against the plate. What? The lights flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. The sound grew louder. It did not crash like a storm. It built, layer upon layer, a pressure rising steadily until it felt as though the world itself were holding its breath. Ethan moved toward the window. The city outside looked wrong. At first, he couldn't pinpoint it. The buildings were still there, the streets still glowed with lines of headlights. Everything was where it should be. And yet, the sky was changing. It was not dark in the way night was meant to be dark. It was deep, endless, as though something vast had stretched across it, swallowing the familiar constellations whole. The stars were gone. Not hidden. Gone. Ethan felt his chest tighten. A flicker of unease crawled up his spine. This is, he murmured. Another sound. Sharper this time. Like fabric tearing. The sky split. A jagged line of light carved its way across the heavens, brilliant and unnatural. It did not flash like lightning. It burned, steady and relentless, as though reality itself had been cut open to reveal something beyond it. The air changed. It grew heavier. Hotter but not with heat. It was a pressure, a weight pressing down from above, thickening each breath. Ethan staggered back, gripping the edge of the counter. What the hell is happening? The sound intensified, no longer distant but immediate, surrounding him on all sides. And then, silence. Total. Absolute. The kind of silence that did not belong in a living world. No traffic. No voices. No wind. Nothing. Ethan's heart pounded in his ears. He stood there for a moment, frozen, caught between instinct and disbelief. Then, he moved. The balcony. The thought came unbidden, sudden and urgent. He didn't know why. He didn't question it. He simply moved. The sliding door resisted, as it always did, but this time he barely noticed. It scraped open with a harsh sound that seemed impossibly loud in the dead silence. Cool air rushed in. Or perhaps it wasn't cool. Perhaps his senses were simply too overwhelmed to register it properly. Ethan stepped outside. And froze. The cat was there. Just as it always was. Sitting near the railing, perfectly still. Waiting. For a moment relief washed over him, irrational, fleeting but real. Something familiar. Something normal. Hey, he said, his voice unsteady, you picked a bad night to show up. The words sounded wrong in the silence. Too loud. Too small. The cat did not move. Ethan frowned. Something. He stopped. The air shifted. The space around the cat rippled. Like heat rising from asphalt. Like the surface of water disturbed by something beneath. Ethan's breath caught. The cat stood. Slowly. Its form blurred. Edges softening, stretching, distorting in ways that made his eyes ache to follow. The black of its fur deepened, thickened, becoming something more than color, something that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. What? Ethan whispered. The cat grew. Not gradually. Not naturally. Violently. Its body elongated, expanding beyond the limits of flesh and bone, reshaping itself into something vast and impossible. The air filled with light, not harsh but brilliant, as though something ancient and powerful had been set free. Wings erupted from its back. Not sprouting. Not unfolding. Bursting. They tore through space itself, vast and radiant, their edges flickering like living flame. Gold and crimson light danced along their surface, illuminating the balcony in a glow that turned night into something otherworldly. Ethan stumbled backward, his mind struggling to catch up with what his eyes were seeing. No, that's not. The creature rose. It did not merely stand. It expanded, filling the space, pushing against the limits of reality itself. Its body shimmered, scales forming from light and shadow, each one catching the glow of the fractured sky. Its head lifted. Majestic. Terrible. Its eyes. Golden. The same eyes that had watched him every night. Now burning like twin suns. Ethan's back hit the glass door. He didn't remember moving. His breath came in short, sharp bursts. What are you? He whispered. The creature regarded him. For a moment there was no answer. Only that gaze. Ancient. Knowing. Familiar. Then, it spoke. I was never what you thought. The voice was not sound alone. It was presence. It resonated in the air, in the ground, in his very bones, deep layered, carrying a weight that words alone could not hold. Ethan shook his head, trying to force reality back into something manageable. No, you worse. A cat. Small. Quiet. Safe. But it had never been those things. The truth stood before him now, undeniable. Before he could speak again, the sky tore open. Not a crack. Not a lines. A rift. It split wide, blazing with light that did not belong to this world. The darkness beyond it was not empty. It was alive, shifting, moving, filled with something vast and incomprehensible. And from that rift, she came, the Dragon Queen. Her descent was not fast. It did not need to be. Everything else moved aside. The air bent. The world recoiled. The very concept of space seemed to struggle to contain her. She emerged like a living storm, her wings stretching across the sky, blotting out what little remained of the stars. Each movement sent ripples through the atmosphere, silent shockwaves that rolled outward, unseen but felt. Ethan's nose weakened. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to hide, to get as far away as possible. But he couldn't move. Because the creature, the one he had fed, the one he had spoken to, stood between them. His voice faltered, I didn't know. The Queen's gaze found him. And the world seemed to stop. There was nothing else. No city, no sky, no self, only that gaze. Ancient, endless, unfathomable. Humans. The word was not spoken. It was declared. Ethan felt it press against him, heavy and undeniable. You have cared for what is mine. His throat tightened. I didn't know it was yours. You did not need to know. She moved closer. Buildings trembled. Glass shuddered. The very foundation of the world seemed to strain under her presence. You showed kindness without reason. Ethan's legs shook. Every part of him screamed that he was standing before something far beyond him. Something that could erase him with a thought. And yet, he didn't look away. It was just a cat, he said, his voice barely steady. The creature beside him let out a low rumble. Not anger, not threat, something softer, almost amused. The Queen studied him. Time stretched. Moments blurred. Ethan didn't know how long he stood there. Seconds, minutes, an eternity. Then, she spoke. Come. Ethan blinked. What? The hatchling lowered itself beside him, its massive form shifting, adjusting, making space. Its wing extended. An invitation. Comes, the Queen repeated, few among your kind act without greed or fear. Her gaze burned into him. You will not return to your small life. Ethan turned. Behind him, the apartment, the same walls, the same furniture, the same life. Safe, predictable, empty. He thought of the mornings, the routine, the silence. He thought of the balcony, the small, quiet moments, the presence that had changed something he hadn't even realized was missing. He looked back at the creature, the one who had chosen to return. Every day, without fail, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt something clear. Not fear, not uncertainty. Joyce. All right, he said. The word was quiet, but it did not waver. The hatchling lowered its wing further. Ethan stepped forward. Every instinct still screamed at him to stop, to turn back, to choose safety. He didn't. He placed his foot against the glowing surface. Warm, solid, alive. He climbed. Above them, the Dragon Queen spread her wings. The sky responded. The rift widened. Light poured through, bathing the city in something ancient and immense. For a moment, Ethan looked down at the world he had known. Small, distant. Then, he looked up and did not look back. The hatchling rose. Power surged. The air ignited with motion as wings beat once, twice, sending shockwaves rolling across the city. They ascended. Vaster, higher. The world fell away. And the sky opened. For the first time in centuries, the Dragon Queen turned. Not as a ruler, not as a conqueror, but as something else. She welcomed, and the humans, the one who had fed her child without knowing what it was, rose into her sky,